anytime you see like a big major change in a culture, there's always going to be the people that don't want to adapt.
What?
And
You don't mean?
Oh my God. I never knew.
During an election year, he said.
Oh, if we weren't on a watch list yet.
Welcome to Casuals of Runeterra, episode 158. I'm your host, Ryan, here with the other host, Ed.
Oh, no, you're recording by yourself. I can't breathe. I'm gonna die.
We're so excited for this episode. We're like, housekeeping is coming. Don't worry. Just wait. We haven't recorded a Fiora episode since episode 2. That's 4 years ago. And we love this damn character.
For years. 4 years. 4 years. I was a young man.
Oh, welcome, guys. You obviously heard Hedge. We'll just give you housekeeping and we'll get straight into it. You can listen to us everywhere. Visit us at Podcast Core for all of our info. Remember, that's podcastcor.com. And then email us at podcastcore@gmail.com. Follow us on all the platforms. That helps us with discoverability. We appreciate it. And then leave a like and comment wherever you listen. But word of mouth has gotten us this far, so tell a friend to find new appreciation for having ears by listening to the Casuals of Runeterra podcast.
Yeah, that's right. If you're friends with Fan Go, we're not interested in their viewership. That's a joke. That's a joke. Van Gogh can listen to this show if he wants.
So today we're talking about Fiora's story, A Matter of Honor. And this is one of those episodes where, like we mentioned up top, we haven't recorded anything really directly Fiora related in a long time. So long that, I mean, this was one of the old stories written, and it was written by Graham McNeill himself, the OG. But episode 2, we go over a lot of Fiora's bio. And it is our older stuff, so maybe a little rough around the edges. We've come a long way since then. We've gotten a lot better since then. But we do have a lot of potent information because her bio is one of the chocked full bios of just what it means to be Fiora in Demacia at this point in time, and really gives you a good rounding of who she is as a character.
Yeah, and like, especially because of like how long it's been since we've talked about it. Like it's kind of weird to like, if you haven't dug any deeper, to get to see this side, because like otherwise, if you're just coming from the game, all you know is that she speaks with a French accent, and then you're usually getting timed out of chat because you had exchanged some words with someone who fed the Fiora. Like that's but like Fiora was put into a very difficult position, and she chose her way to get out of the difficult position. And that's what the story really highlights, is how she is really turning around House Laurent.
Yeah, and to the themes that we've dug into about the society that is Demacia, if you've been listening to those parts of the discussion that Hetch and I have, we'll have one at the end of this episode as well, because this reinforces it in a very unique way, of showing a character that is not really a hero in the sense, and not even really an anti-hero, and pretty selfish in a way that's unique in Demacia, because the question becomes, to what end? And that's kind of some foreshadowing. But let's just start with a story told best in 3 parts, A Matter of Honor. So part 1, we start the story with Fiora, and she's staring daggers at her opponent, Umberto. And she could tell that his 4 brothers and him are kind of annoyed that they're even here answering the challenge to the duel that she's put up in the Hall of Blades. So you have people gathering around to watch as well. And as she's preparing, her older brother comes in to check if she thinks this is really necessary at this point. It's become kind of routine, and like, to what end? And she reminds him that it's very important that whoever is spreading rumors about our family are tested so those rumors can be stopped because they won't stop unless she makes them, essentially.
Yeah, and like it's I love this exchange here because like that is the words that Fiora is saying is pretty much like, like if we are going to like preserve our honor, this has to be done.
Mhm.
Like this is a necessary thing to do. It's like those are the words that are coming out, but like the we get like the writing is done very well here to where you get
Oh,
this
what? For real?
undertone.
I wonder
Oh,
why.
I wonder why. But like you get this undertone of just being really pissed. like like Fiora's just doesn't like this guy. And
Yeah.
like despite the fact that what she's saying is correct and everything, like there's definitely a sense of like, nah, Fiora just don't like this man. Like Fiora's gonna be kind of happy to be like, yeah, no, I am so glad that you've been talking crap about House of Lauron. Let me show you what happens.
That's a great point. It's like you've given me an excuse. Because I'll even go further and says she doesn't like the archetype of man this person is. And
Absolutely.
she can immediately see it. And this is also a notion towards her skill because she's a very observant person. She's not very talkative, even with her brother here, who I think is her second oldest brother, because she's the youngest. Like I said, listen to episode 2. We'll give you a bit of stuff here, but we don't want to spoil too much because her story's that good.
Yes.
But she is the youngest and also a woman in the Laurent family. So as a duelist, this is a big deal. And the way she talks to her brothers is as if she's the older sibling. So, that on top of what we're going to go talk about here, where she steps forward and she noticed that Umberto is not appraising her for her skill as she's appraising him. He's appraising her for her body. And he's even crudely joking with his buddies and kind of like winking and nodding, right? And he draws his weapon and starts to walk towards his duelist mark. And she immediately notices that his weapon is a curved cavalry saber, which is a good weapon, but it's unfit for dueling. And also, as he's warming up with his weapon, doing slashes, etc., in the open air, she notices that he's mimicking the movements that she's doing, but
Yeah.
she has a different weapon.
Right. Like it's a twofold thing of just that he clearly doesn't understand, the weapon that he's carrying. It's also mentioned that like there's like jewels inlaid in
Yeah.
the pommel and stuff like that. So like this is probably not even just like a weapon because it's obviously not a rapier, so it's not fit for a duel in that sense, but it's probably not even like battle ready essentially, right? Like it
Yeah.
probably wasn't made it was made more for like the ballroom instead of for the battlefield.
Yep.
And then it's like, reinforcing like, the fact that it's like, oh, with you mimicking me, not only do you not understand how to use that saber, but now you're just pissing me off even more.
Yeah, and she's a great balance between using her anger as fuel, but also staying cognizant of the situation because she's sizing him up in a different way than he's sizing her up, which is very important because, like her brother has said, we're doing this again, question mark. That means something. So this takes us to part 2. They begin circling each other in the dueling ritual. And what this ritual is both people start at their marks. You then rotate to the other mark. And in that time frame, you're allowed to gather information, right? To essentially prepare because it's a duel to the death, essentially, or it should be. And she begins the part of the ritual when she gets over there that you introduce yourself. And Umberto immediately interrupts her. She avoids his attempt to anger her, and he continues with the statement to list his crimes of saying, okay, I've introduced myself. Now I'm telling you why this is happening, which is essentially taking down the name of House Laurent and lying about the legitimacy of her lineage, which is a huge offense in old world Demacia, where we're in this space. And when you look at the time frame of her being older now, this is post Jarvan the Third's death. Jarvan the Fourth is leading. There's been a sea change. Garen is head of the army. All that stuff has happened. But House Laurent's in this weird situation where they hold on to old nobility standards of what it means to have value. And she even goes into that. There's a part in this is just Graham McNeill being Graham McNeill. And we'll discuss this more at the end about her worldview on the concept of rituals and trends, right?
Right. Yeah, and like it's very fun here as far as like the fact that like she is going through this ritual. Again, like we said, we're not going to dive like too deep into like her as a character because we that was one of our earliest episodes. So like we hold it near and dear to us, and we
Yeah.
really appreciate you to go listen to it. But um, like the fact that she has such an old mindset and is trying to like really hammer home that it's like these traditions need to stay alive and everything is just part of her character,
Yeah.
as well as like combined with that Demacian upbringing. Like this is anytime you see like a big major change in a culture, there's always going to be the people that don't want to adapt.
What?
And
You don't mean?
oh my god. I never knew.
During an election year, he said.
Oh, if we weren't on a watch list yet. But so yeah, like the face, like if you needed a face for in the world of League of Legends, the face of the conservatives who refuse
Yep.
to change from old tradition, it's Fiora. Like, and that as far as like a champion, like obviously the big face would be the Mage Seekers,
Yeah.
but they like named character, it's Fiora, and that's what this scene is here, because it's like, no, don't interrupt this ritual. We've done this for hundreds of years, and you're going to pay respects to it.
Yeah, and so he's underestimating her, and as she's giving the second part of her speech, he pretty much responds by like, "Duh, I know what I did. Let's go." And then she offers him an alternative to death. Now, this is the unique part. This is the part that's different from tradition, and this is what she thinks is her being a progressive side of the old way. She offers him the alternative that he can cut off his right ear and walk around disfigured to atone for his actions. And he's shocked by this because he didn't expect it. And he's also angered by it because he doesn't see her as an equal or even possibly stronger than he is. And she thinks is totally reasonable, which is also a whole different type of messed up. And without answering, he just begins charging forward with his sword recklessly. And this leads us into part 3.
And I love this. I love that Fiora is offering this, because this is just Grand McNeill like showing off like all of his old chaps here.
Yeah.
Because it's like, yeah, I am being just and I am being fair in the most draconian way ever. Which is, yeah, if you will permanently disfigure yourself, I will allow you to live. Like,
Yeah.
It really just does a good job of shaping up again like that old Demacian sense of justice that Fiora has, while also like showing that we're kind of adjusting to the times, right? But like and it is done in just such the most Graham McNeill way of like, how do we show that? Draconian. That's how we do it.
Yeah, a man who's written so much Warhammer is like, yeah, okay, he knows how to, he is in his lane.
Yeah. Oh, and he is thriving.
So in part 3, we start off with a laughably brief moment of Sakuga here. And I'm just going to read the passage because it's pretty short. It starts with, quote, "His anger at what he assumed was her arrogance overcame his fear, and he stamped forward with the tip of his sword, thrusting for her heart. Fiora had read the attack before it was launched, made a quarter turn to the left, letting the curved blade cut only air. Her own blade swept up, then down in a precise diagonal arc. The crowd gasped, and a wet splatter of blood on the stone, and the shocking suddenness of the duel ending. Fiora turned as Umberto's sword clattered to the granite flagstones. He fell to his knees, then slumped back onto his haunches, hand clutched to his open throat, from which blood pumped enthusiastically." Yeah.
And GG. Like
Listen, we've done a lot of Sakuga. I don't know. I think that's the world. That's was it any percent speed run?
Yes, yes. Like that was the definition of a speed run, and I really appreciate that the that we're not getting more Sakuga here because again the whole build up to this is Fiora's brother being like, have we really got to do this again? And it's like, like we're constantly being fed that like this is not a one-time occurrence.
Yeah.
So of course it's going to be just like, you know, oh, like read the instructions on the packet, follow instructions, move on to the next. That's what Fiora does. And it really just helps build like how strong of a duelist that she is, right? But like especially like, oh yeah, I read the move. Quarter turn to the left, sword up, diagonal arc, sheath the weapon next.
Yep. Yep. And we wrap up the story where she bows to the soon-to-be dead Umberto who's struggling on the ground, and she just walks back over to her brother's stands, and then he asks, how many duels has it been at this point? And she's like, maybe around 30. She's kind of losing count. That's in case you're wondering, that's a lot in any story. Remember, she's the youngest, so at this point, I think she was 12 in her bio with her father. So then now she's probably around like 24, or probably a little bit older than that, but not much older. And he mentions that, this won't stop. You're going to keep doing this. And that doesn't deter her initiative. Fiora's kind of stuck in her way, even though she thinks it's a new way, that I will keep doing this as long as it takes. And she says, to wrap it up, that every death restores our family's honor. Every death brings redemption closer, to which her brother, Amdar, responds, redemption for who? And she doesn't respond. And we end the story there. Great writing, first of all.
Wonderful.
But this leads us to our discussion at the end here. If you want to hang around, it's usually fun. But we appreciate you listening to this point. You have the information you need. But that's the point, right? Her brother's the vehicle for us to be like, you've been doing this for 30 duels. You're constantly thinking that you're solving the problem over time, but it's never going to end. So why are you doing this? What is the point besides serving what could be your own secret bloodlust for this? Like, you are essentially just an executioner at this point.
Well, yeah, to really hammer home, because it's like, losing count around the 30 mark. One of the most famous American serial killers is John Wayne Gacy.
Oh,
He was charged for 33 murders.
shit.
So we're in serial killer territory as far as body count. Okay,
Yeah.
it's like that. So again, like it really is like, is it about your own bloodlust or is it about something else? And like especially like reading through like Fiora's biography and the relationship that she had with her father and the way that that relationship followed its course. Trying not to get into too many spoilers here.
Yeah.
I think that's really what kind of sets the tone for like this draconian mindset to just get locked in, because especially when her father was still alive, it was more of a thing of like House Lauron was in a higher seat of power.
Yeah.
So this is definitely like a Fiora that is coming from the top, like started at the top and now we're here,
Yeah.
instead of started at the bottom, now we're here, right? And so then it's like, I feel like it's less about her bloodlust and more of like she doesn't know how to get back up there.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, how do I restore our name? The only thing I'm good at is killing. I guess I gotta play to my strengths. Like that's what it
That's a great
feels
point.
like, right?
Yeah.
Like
That's a
it's
great point.
so it's one of those things of like you can't just kind of wrap it up in a tiny little bow because it is a noble house. Like this is a house of not just of a high standing within the Demacian courts, but a long time of being at a high standing. And like when you get into like that level of reputation and everything, like there's a lot of different political things happening in the background. And like setting up Fiora as a character doesn't address those things, right?
Yeah.
Because especially like if we get to a point like this is something we've talked about before when with discussing our arcane episodes, right? Like in looking at the next season of Arcane, because we know that Arcane has already announced that it's like, you know, this is going to be like the final chapter that we see in Piltover. And so like if we want Noxus to be the next one, right? Like that, I'm not changing that. I
Yeah.
feel like Noxus is going to be the right region to go to next. But if we were to get like an Arcane-esque story in Demacia, there's no way that you can talk about like the political standings of Demacia without talking about the big noble houses. And House of Lauron is one of those. And whenever you are talking about like, you know, political machinacia at that level, everyone's going to get dragged in. So that's
Yeah.
a lot of stuff that Fiora is going to have to deal with too, she's dealing with in this story as well. But like, that's just not the story that we're dealing with, right? So it's really hard to just be like Fiora is just has her own unsated bloodlust when you have to consider that there's a lot of things at the table and she's suddenly in charge of the house despite being the youngest and despite being a woman. So there's a lot on her plate. So yeah, like, okay, do you have bloodlust? You probably do. But at the same time, like, we gotta keep going. So next batter, bring him up.
So this takes us to a quote that I want to bring up, which is it's kind of it's not weird where it shows up in the story, but it stood out to me as a great inner monologue of sorts of her thought process. So it starts with quote, "The rituals of the duel were important. They, like the measured tread, were designed to allow civilized folk to maintain the illusion of nobility in killing. Fiora knew they were good laws, just laws, but that didn't take away from the fact that she was about to kill a man before her. And because Fiora believed in these laws, she had to make her offer." I- It's there's a lot of complex stuff going on there,
Yeah.
right? Because when we think about the effect, this is a through line that Hetch and I talk about is the effects of the Demacian tradition of justified violence, right? That line's all those words matter because it played into Fiora's personality as she was growing up because she was a shitty kid. Like she was not ever easy to deal with in life.
Right.
And that played into the result of what happened to her father and what happened past that point. And even if you look at Jarvan the Third and how he ruled, he was someone who came at a time where he was lightly starting to buck tradition, or he would acknowledge the difficulty of shit, I don't want to have to do this. Why can't you guys just figure this out as families? Why are you forcing me to follow the rule of law because I'm the guy? And ultimately, his hands end up tied at that level, right? And they just keep doing the same thing. So she knows what she's doing. She knows she's using this Demacian tradition as an excuse. So when she's giving an offer, she thinks, oh, this is me fighting back with all my might against what is. But we have characters that are better examples in Demacia of people who are truly bucking tradition.
Right.
So this pales in comparison, which means, okay, well, you're essentially just hand
Uh,
waving a bit and you're making it look
yeah.
good,
I mean,
but you're not,
again,
you're not effective.
like to really, you know, to like kind of reinforce that point, like it's reinforcing something I said, which is like she's the face of conservatism, right?
Yeah.
Because the like what she's doing is she's buying all of the merch and then recording herself burning it.
Yeah. It's actually a
Like
good one. Yeah.
it's like, yeah, okay, Fiora, you like, look, I made him an offer, I gave him a chance to live.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, sure, you already bought all the merchandise, they got their money, like you're not doing anything to capitalism at that point. And it's like, Fiora, you're not doing anything to the tradition, like you're still gonna kill him.
Yeah, and even the fanfare of it, if you've listened to episode 2, where we talk about the fanfare of people that are coming to watch this stuff. It's just like gladiator combat, where you're feeding into that part of the tradition as well. It's not just the act. Everything you're doing is constantly feeding into the machine. So you're at no point going to change that machine from within. And you're not even really within because of how your house has fallen. So you're becoming
Yep.
the greatest scapegoat of all time because you're
Yep.
the little guy trying to prove himself in a system that you think you're trying to change.
Yep.
It's good. It's she's a great character in that sense. Not great as the character itself, but like the way
Yeah.
she's placed into
I'm
this world and the role she plays is very unique in Demacia at this point.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that we love this character so much is because of the role that she plays within all of, like, this ever-changing landscape of Demacia.
Yeah.
Because she is the face of old Demacia, and like whenever, like one of my favorite stories that I was so excited to talk about, and I'm like still some of my favorite episodes, is when we got to talk about Kale and Morgana.
Yeah.
And like Kale and Morgana, we're talking about stuff that happened millennia before Fiora. But, go look, if you read this story, like you'll notice as far as like that mindset of justice, like the sense of justice that Fiora has is a lot more in line with the followers of Kale than anything else.
Yep.
And the fact that they run so in line with each other, despite being separated by thousands of years.
Yeah.
Like that's really what kind of sets the stage for Fiora being the face of conservative Demacia, right?
Yeah.
Which is also one of the reasons why we love this character, because like you can't have all of the great stuff that I know I, for one, can't wait to dive into at some point. Like especially when we can look deeper into the stories of like the interactions of Lux with Silas.
Yep.
The interactions with Shyvana and Jarvan, like those, the stakes that they have to go through don't exist without characters like Fiora.
Yeah.
Without the mindset that Fiora represents, because she's not, granted, she is in a minority, but it's not a quiet minority. And if that sounds reflective of real life, then
Good.
then you're paying attention.
The paint is good.
The paint is good. Just slap it on a Corolla and let us play.
All right. Essentially, she needs to go to Ionia. She needs to take a trip and find herself abroad. Because
Could you imagine a short story where she runs into like Lee Sin and Udyr just hanging out?
She goes
And
to
then,
find like
I could just see like Lee Sin just having a mental breakdown of, I have to do this again?
yeah.
You were so far out of balance again?
There's so much potential, but we'll leave it there. And to Hedge's point, we'll get to the Silas stuff. I know it's been 4 years, but listen.
No,
There's so much.
It's been 4 years. We get it. But this is like one of the reasons that we are so excited to go into stories like this is because like the events that Silas specifically like sets off is absolutely massive. And despite the fact that it's not, like ruination levels of destruction for the lands of Runeterra, it's that level of impact for Demacia. Which is why we can't just jump into it. Like, you've got to trust us, all right? Because yes, the paint is good, but we've got to show you all the colors. You're not going to appreciate the picture that has been painted by some of these absolutely gifted authors unless we set the stage. We have to set the stage for you to enjoy the show. So, if you've been waiting for as long as we have, thank you for being patient, but we got to ask for you to be a little more patient. It's driving me crazy too. So like you're not alone in that. All right. You can just podcastcore@gmail.com. You can let me know how crazy you're going too. We'll cry over a cup of coffee or something. I don't know.
Well said. And with that, as always, thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with the next episode.
Take care, everybody.